Hey everybody, we're here at Zen Hustlers Balance podcast, and we're very excited to be back in person post-pandemic. I know it's not over yet, but we've been wanting to do more in-person interviews, and we've been doing a lot of Zooms, which we will also continue with some of our remote guests. But we're lucky enough to have an in-person guest today. This is Dr. Laura Kasper. Thank you. She's an executive psychologist based up in San Francisco. We're down here in Santa Cruz, and we met recently at an event. I loved what you were talking about. It was around co-founder conflict and how to resolve that. And tell us a little bit about your background and how this work came to be. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. When I started as a psychologist, I started working with couples, so I'm trained as a couples therapist. Mm-hmm. But before I became a psychologist, I was a management consultant. I worked at Accenture for 5 years. And so I'd always kind of wanted to be in the executive world. And so just over time, when I moved back to the Bay Area, 6 or 7 years ago.
Where'd you move from?
I was living in Washington, D.C. So my practice was in D.C.
Got it.
When I moved back, I don't know. I just kind of had the idea. I read an article.
There was no aha moment about this?
I read an article in the New York Times about it.
Okay.
And I was like, I could do that because I've got the business background, I've got the couples training. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do that. So then I just started doing it, and people came.
So you mentioned couples. Do you feel like founders, and we're talking about like typically two-person founder teams, mm-hmm. or is that uncommon to have? Is that the most common team structure that you've noticed?
Most of the time, what people who come to me are two. I've had 3, and I just recently had 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So prior to your work, would you say that they were going to couples therapy? Like, what was their service that they were finding before this was a thing?
I think the thing with co-founder, co-founder counseling or co-founder coaching is it's a little like what couples counseling was 15 years ago.
Okay.
They only come when it's really bad.
Okay.
Whereas I feel like people go to couples counseling more when it's, they're not at the end of the relationship. Whereas co-founders, I think that they're still catching on that they can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you're not co-founders out there and you have a work relationship that's really important to you, or you have work relationships in general, you're gonna have conflict.
Yep.
Right? Conflict is a human emotion. It's something that we deal with every day. So what are some general themes that you see just around conflict in the workplace? Mm-hmm. If you could just speak to a couple of general themes mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. where conflict tends to arise.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of conflict, co-founders in particular, but let's say in general, there's often power dynamics that are involved, right?
Okay.
So
hierarchical structures, top down, bottom up.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about co-founders as a pair, and you kind of draw a parallel to, parents or mm-hmm. married couples, like they fight about the things that, like, decision making and like who's got the final say, and so when you're in a work relationship and maybe it's a peer. Do you have power over that person, or do you have influence over that person? And they don't do what you want them to do, and so you're struggling with that, right? Like, I feel like that's the common theme for work as well. It's just power and like who has it, and how much do I have over you or not? Okay,
so power dynamics. How about money? How much does money come up around this issue? I mean,
money in co-founders is huge, right?
Okay.
Sort of who brings it in, who gets more of it, who's got more equity, who's the person who's related to the funding, or the funding facing person, like. Money, definitely, and how it's allocated. Does it go to your pet projects, or does it go to my pet projects?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so delegation of funds becomes a big issue too.
Absolutely, yes.
And then how about staff? How much of this is about management styles, managing of staff, workplace culture? Like, let's talk to that for a second.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and because I've been thinking about this a lot. I have not had co-founders come to me mm-hmm. with fights about culture.
Interesting.
It hasn't been about culture. It's been about product market fit, direction. Mm-hmm. We haven't gotten the funding. It's your fault that we haven't gotten it. So it has not been about culture.
I'm wondering, and I've been involved in many startups over the years, that they're not even thinking about culture, mm-hmm. but they're exposing everyone to a culture.
Yes.
Now we noticed this. So this might be a potentially new path of like, what is your culture? Are you consciously creating your culture, or is it happening by default,
Yes.
which is dangerous, I think.
Yes.
Because I've been involved in a lot of startups and it's go, 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 run. We're not going to think about culture. We're just going to heads down work. And you don't realize you're training your team to be that culture during that process.
Yes.
Has that has not come up, but I'm guaranteeing it's gonna hit them in their face at some point.
Yeah, it hasn't come up as a source of conflict between them.
Okay.
But it's definitely like an example I think of is, the hire, like the person they hired that is unwilling to look at like how they're interacting with other people, right? And then my co-founders are like, "Oh, we're creating a culture that we've hired people that don't give a shit, or, or give a hoot, how they affect other people."
Yeah.
And so then they're like, "Oh, we should make different decisions. We should make different hiring decisions." So I feel like, through some of the fights they've had, they see some of the places where they're creating culture, but it hasn't been the driver of why.
Okay.
They've come to me.
Got it. And is it typical Bay Area startups, tech? Like, are you in a certain niche of type of business in your work?
That's a good question.
Okay.
It has tended to be, some of it has been Bay Area tech.
Okay.
Some of it has been, I feel like I've attracted companies that have some kind of bigger mission.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so global companies. They're not just Bay Area.
They're not just Bay Area.
Okay, and they're not just tech.
And they're not just tech.
Okay, good. So if you're in a company and you're having conflict, obviously it's coming up. So we talked about power dynamics, we talked about money, we talked a little bit about the unconscious culture that they're building. Are there any interpersonal relationships that are happening? Are these ever couples already?
Yes.
So tell me about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one, if we're at the founder kind of conversation, a lot of founders decide to start a company with friends or with romantic partners. And at some level, this is a terrible decision.
So tell them, why is this a terrible decision?
It's a terrible decision. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, the people, you think it's a good idea, you like spending time with them, you like a lot of things about being social with them, but starting a business together is completely different than you like to hang out on Friday night together, right?
Yeah.
And go to see music or whatever.
Yeah.
So
you're going from dating to married almost.
Yeah.
There's a lot more at stake.
It's a lot more at stake, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like your romantic analogy. You've decided to have a baby together.
A baby. Okay. Thank you. The baby is the company, and now you're married to your friend.
Having a baby
together and having to raise it and do all the late nights, the feedings. It's a really good analogy, actually.
It's a perfect analogy because if you think about parents, it makes sense that parents, might get in power struggles about where are we sending them to school and who's the nanny going to be? Are we going to nanny? Are we going to keep it home? Are we going to send it to daycare? Like these are life and death decisions is the wrong word, but these are very intimate, choices. And most couples believe, and I mean, I would put myself in that category, that you're going to make a joint decision about these big things for this baby, right? Like you both want to be on board for who the caretaker is or what school you're going to. But when you're running a company, you can't be egalitarian and completely collaborative about every decision. It just doesn't work the same way.
Got it.
But a lot of people, when you're friends, or particularly when you're romantic partners, you expect the same level of collaboration and egalitarianism, and it's just not possible.
It's just not there. Okay. Anything else we haven't covered as far as topics of conflict that come up often?
Topics of conflict that come up often. I think we've covered it.
Okay, great. I'm going to have you just roll a little closer. Because as you get more comfortable and push back.
Yes.
Cool. So we'll put a break there in that. So we're back. We're talking about different types of conflict. So give us an example, if you can, anonymously. What's a recent conflict that's come up that you've been addressing with a client?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about a set of co-founders that came to me that has a pretty typical setup, which is a visionary, creative founder who just doesn't have the desire, capacity is the wrong word, but just their zone of genius is not spreadsheets and budgets and work plans.
Of the company.
And that kind of detail. Like they're the amazing creative mind, right?
Yeah.
And yet, this person was in the CEO position and realized that they weren't the best person to raise the money, and they weren't the best person to put the structures in place to really grow the business.
Okay.
And so they brought in a CEO.
Okay.
So that visionary CEO gave up the CEO position and brought in this new CEO. And so it was just, the process of making that work was very challenging because there's a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Right. The visionary had to let go of their baby.
So are you doing in-person counseling sessions with both so they can have kind of facilitated dialogue?
Oh yeah.
Or what is the process?
Yeah.
Two people come to you, they're having a conflict. What is the process that you do?
Yeah.
With
So this was actually 4 of them came.
Okay. 4 of them. Okay.
4 of them.
Wow.
There was the
quad.
The typical 3.
Okay.
I feel like 3.
What are the typical 3 roles that you're saying?
CEO,
CTO,
CTO, and sort of
operations
CMO,
person?
like either operations person, marketing person, product person, like and they came to me with having added this CEO.
Okay. And then the 4th person was brought in externally by the board, or who brought them in?
The 3,
they did.
Yeah,
okay.
They brought them in. Yeah,
okay.
They made
Interesting.
the decision. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That was something we should bring up, is this board decision and how the board impacts the roles.
Absolutely. The board plays a big
Okay,
role.
so you've got 4 people in the room now.
Yeah.
That's a lot of conversations, a lot of listening.
Yes.
What are some of the activities that you're walking them through?
Yeah, I mean, so in the program, essentially what they do when they come to the program is they fill out some pre-work, in terms of just give me the lay of the land from each of their perspectives of what's going on in the relationship around a lot of these dynamics, decision-making, power, authority, whatever. I have set up something called relationship KPIs.
Oh,
so
very business focused. I like that.
So at the beginning of the relationship, they kind of identify like how productive is your conflict?
Yeah.
How well do you think you guys are sharing power? How well do you think you're managing money? And then one of my all-time favorite, which is a lot of the root of a lot of power struggle, is how much of your sense of self-worth is wrapped up in the business's success.
Wow. Okay, that was a big one.
Yeah.
You might want to let that one land again. How much of your self-worth is wrapped up in your business success?
Yes.
Jesus, that's pretty complicated when you're talking about your own self-worth, and then is it going in the right direction? Are you feeling successful? I'm guessing even just defining success becomes a challenge for some teams. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it generally generally it means like, are we making money? Are we getting fun? Are we making is the company progressing in the ways
in the direction we were hoping?
Correct. Yeah.
So users, typical kind of KPIs: users, growth, revenue, team growth, hiring roles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is some level of subjectivity to just the gut check of okay, how much of my sense of self-worth am I tying to all these things out there that a lot of them I don't have a lot of control over.
Yeah. And I'm guessing confidence comes up, and internal dialogue of am I worthy? Do I know enough? Especially first-time founders, I'm sure it can be challenging.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. There's a lot wrapped into this, I could say. And then, so do you have a set time period that you do with them?
Yeah. So
tell us about the process
so
that way.
Right. So it's a 6-week program. So
Okay.
they set their KPIs up front. And each week that I meet with them, they do sort of like pre-work videos, and then a sort of pre-work worksheet where they kind of they get some key concepts. They do a kind of worksheet where they sort of get into themselves and sort of their own perspective, and then they come in. We kind of go through the tools and the worksheet that they did, and then we just kind of have an open session where I watch them try to navigate some conflict, and I give them real-time feedback about what they're each doing that they could improve on how to navigate the conflict. And then I also give a after the fact kind of post-game video with more conflict, maybe, or not more conflict, more feedback, maybe stuff that I was thinking about but I didn't say but would still be valuable for them.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm guessing some of the typical things that come up are listening.
Yes.
So are you doing role playing with active listening? Are you mirroring that for teams?
Yes.
Do you want to give a little, not example, but like a little definition of how that works?
Yeah. I mean, so, right, some of the core concepts, listening and sharing are core concepts in the program. And, listening, I've been shocked by how much my co-founders, it's so simple and yet it's so effective, right? If you really ask yourself, am I really a good listener?
Yeah.
Chances are we're not, right?
We're not.
We're not.
We're always thinking of the next thing to say.
Always thinking of the next thing to say.
We're not actually quietly just listening.
Yes.
And absorbing.
Yes. And so much of conflict is the other person has not felt heard and understood by you for their perspective, even if you don't agree with their perspective. That's okay.
Yeah.
But most of it is because I don't feel understood, or like you really heard me. So some key principles of listening are feeding back.
Yeah.
Pretty much what exactly you heard.
Yeah.
Now it sounds so mundane.
Simple. Yeah.
It's so mundane, and people are like, really? And I'm always like, try it.
Try it.
Just try it. And then they do it, and it's magic.
Yeah.
Because, and so it's a question. It's like, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is blah, 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 blah. And it's important to check, did I get everything? Did I miss something?
Yeah. What was the key things that you say?
Yeah.
Repeated back. And that allows people to feel heard, expressed, and then at least you feel like, hey, I shared this. You heard it. You may not agree with it, but at least I feel heard.
Yeah. And that's so important, because that's one thing. People often think that being empathic and kind of communicating to somebody else like, oh, I really get what you're saying is, oh, I really agree with what you're saying. It's not. It's just like, okay, I get from your perspective, this is what you're struggling with. I really understand that. I don't see it the same way, but I really understand that. That is so powerful, and people get caught up all the time.
Today, I'm a published author, paid speaker, and consultant, but it wasn't always this way. Before, I was confused on how to step into becoming a thought leader, but I knew I wanted to. So I completed Break On Through, an online thought leadership development program with 5 top experts. In just 6 weeks, they gave me the tangible skills, strategy, and support I needed to authentically find my voice and boldly create this brand. Now, people can engage with my work online. Check it out today.
Are you seeking to become a thought leader in your area of expertise? Do you want to have a following of people who are connected, engaged, who are listening to you and want to hear from you frequently? Are you currently an author, TEDX speaker, keynote host, coach, consultant, or entrepreneur founder? Are you hoping to be one of these roles? If so, you're going to love this. We spent years creating this unique and bold expert level online course called Break On Through. It's a 6-week video curriculum with myself, Jared Brick, a media marketing expert, along with 4 other top leaders. Our goal is to skyrocket you into thought leadership role at any stage and any age in your career field by leveraging media and the modern syndication processes. Right now, we have a special offer running for just the first 10 people to sign up for this exciting and engaging online course. Click below to learn more, and we hope to see you in the spotlight soon. So we are back with Dr. Laura Kasper. She helps teams deal with co-founder conflict and any conflict in general that's coming up. You don't have to be a 2-person co-founder team. You can be in a work environment where there is conflict in the environment. I imagine that's almost everyone's environment, and some teams are just better at it. They're coming to you. What is the moment when they contact you? There's a crisis on the table. Give us an example of what a crisis, where it's like, look, we've got to get help externally. Yeah, what does that look like for most teams?
I mean, most teams.
Or a recent example.
Yeah, recent example. I mean, I think about co-founders who, one of them, they brought in an outside consulting firm to figure out some of the org chart stuff. And one of the co-founders agreed to an org chart that the other one was, not where they wanted to be, and just made that unilateral decision. And so, the two of them were like, wow, trust has completely been broken in our relationship. I would say it's like a level of trust has been broken.
Got it.
That's kind of feels like, whoa, this is almost beyond repair.
Okay. So we were in this really strong trust relationship. Something breaks. Now we need help.
Yeah.
They reach out to you. They go through your 6-week program.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the 6 weeks, where are they at? Where do you, it's like, bye, good luck, you're done. Or they just have new skills?
They have new
skills.
skills.
So where do you set them up for success around that now?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, right. They've got new skills around around listening and around sharing
Mm-hmm.
and around influence. So, what we said earlier was a lot of conflict is related to power struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And there's positional power. And then there's the sense that I'm powerful, the sense that I can influence you,
Mm-hmm.
even if you have more equity than I have.
Yeah.
Even if you have a job, you have more power in the
role.
Right.
Yeah.
But that I can communicate with you in a way that influences you.
Mm-hmm.
Then what I notice is a lot of power struggles go down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to have a little fun and do a little bit of role play around. I'll play the sales kind of co-founder.
Okay.
And if you want to play the technical co-founder in this example. So I recently worked with a company where the technical co-founder was very heads down, building, not really worried about, I wouldn't say worried, but couldn't focus on the direction of where the company was going for growth. And the sales CEO was more fundraising and trying to create partnerships and revenue.
Yep.
And then as it was not going good, they started to blame one another.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're too heads down building. Oh, you're too distracted by revenue and not focused on which direction strategically we should go.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a real, co-founder issue that was on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some skills that they can practice in real time?
Mm-hmm.
Give us some examples of
Mm-hmm.
what can they do, and they either have seen or they've gone through your program or they haven't yet. So not everyone will be able to go through your program. We'd love for them to.
Yeah.
So where can they start? What's the best thing? Should they just set time and talk? What should they do?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the example that you just gave, I think one of the biggest things that jumps out at me is the sense of blame.
Yeah.
So blame isn't going to make conflict go anywhere but get bigger.
Got it. Okay.
And so the first one is like accepting the idea that in any conflictual dynamic in a relationship, they're co-created. Mm-hmm. So if there's conflict, both people have some role to play in the conflict.
Got it. Okay.
Right? Versus like, it's your fault. Like if you stay in a blaming place, you're never going to get out of conflict. Yeah. So
it's this dangerous loop.
Yeah. It's a dangerous loop.
Okay. Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Are we getting them to say, hey, I was responsible for X, you were responsible for this, and taking the responsibility of like, hey, it's not going the right direction. It's not going where we hoped. Okay. So there's stopping the blame game, personal responsibility. You talked about listening earlier. Do they need to have a facilitator for that conversation, or what do you recommend for founders who are kind of hitting heads?
Yeah, I mean, I
or
think
teams for that matter.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you can the skills of listening, of actually like practicing active listening and having the other person feel heard. Yeah, sure. Is it helpful to have a facilitator? Yes, but I think that you can do it on your own. It just takes some discipline.
Yeah.
Are you really willing to like carve out the time? Because think about it. What would you do? You would schedule the time.
Yeah.
You would come meet with me. You would be essentially signing up to agree to play by my rules.
Yeah.
So if you can do that for yourself and say, okay, let's sit down every week, that's one thing that co-founders, but also in work relationships, it's like, if you're not taking time to actually talk about the relationship, then
you're just kind of heads down, doing, not focused.
Yeah. Which is one thing.
So scheduling time together to talk. Sounds kind of simple.
Yeah.
But they're not doing it.
No. And then practicing active listening, and then learning to share well. I mean, that's that's a huge part.
Give me an example of that. Like, how do I share something well versus? Something well? Yeah. What does that look like?
Well, okay. So let's talk about what it doesn't look like.
Okay.
Right. So not sharing well is like blaming the other person. you did this wrong, or I can't believe you, so I'm a facilitator for the interpersonal dynamics class at Stanford Business School. And so one of their ideas is that to share well, you stay on your side of the net. So when you play tennis, you hit the ball on this side. You don't run around and hit the ball back, right?
Okay.
You just stay on this side. And so if I'm crossing the net and I'm describing your behavior and I'm saying what you did or didn't do, that is all
You cross the line.
You're just crossing the net, right?
Yeah.
So
there's no I statements.
There's
typical?
no I statements.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you stay on your side of the net and you talk about observable behaviors that a camera would capture.
Yeah.
So when you came 10 minutes late to the meeting. That's a
factual
thing.
Yeah.
You came 10 minutes late to the meeting. When you came 10 minutes late to the meeting, and when you come 10 minutes late to every meeting, that's probably unlikely, right? When you come 10 minutes late to most meetings, I feel...
Got it. Yeah. Typical therapy type conversations, I statements, feeling statements, and then requests. Are we doing request statements?
But before we get to requests, it's the observable behavior is really important. And then if you're going to say anything about your experience, it's usually helpful other than a feeling. And most people don't get feelings right. Like I feel angry. I feel annoyed that you come 10 minutes late to this meeting most weeks. Because the story I tell myself is you don't respect me and my time.
Got it.
Right? That's a story, right? I'm angry that you come late.
That's the emotion.
That's the emotion. But the story, most people don't own that it's a story. Like I'm making up, I don't know if you respect me or not.
Yeah.
Right?
So they've kind of had these conversations. It's scheduled. They're making time to talk. Are they writing something? Are they coming up with agreements? What are some of the next steps for the facilitation process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, when they're with me, they're not making any agreements or coming up with anything. They're really, because most people have a backlog of
stuff that they haven't been talking about.
Exactly, that they haven't been talking about, right?
Okay,
and so they're just kind of getting through the backlog of being heard and understood.
Okay.
So that they can actually move forward on something.
Okay. Do you want to share a success story? A client or a team that you've worked with and now do you check back in with them? Do you go back and check back in and say, hey, how are things going?
I don't, but it's a great idea.
Yeah. Like 6 months from now, I'm going to check in, see how things are going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
How about just within the 6-week window? Have you had any success stories where you just really saw a lot of growth?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What's one of those?
Yeah, it's incredible. I think about like a couple. So a married couple that came to me, and I wouldn't say they were on the...
And they were working together.
Oh,
God.
So
okay.
They married.
So you think your relationship's challenging. Try working together as founders of something.
Right. So, I wouldn't say they were on the edge of divorce by any stretch of imagination, but they were in a really hard place. And they've gotten to the point where they're back and they feel emotionally connected to one another again.
Okay.
And they've also made some decisions about how they're relating to the business that they are both able to live with. Whereas, one of them was on strike when I met them.
Like, I'm not going to participate?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. One of them was just I am on strike until we can
You're pretty checked out at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing that in a job?
Yeah.
I'm going to not participate.
Right.
Wow. Interesting.
Right. Yep.
See, these are the things you can do when you start a company. You can pull stuff like that. And especially if you know the other founder, be like, hey, I'm not going to participate. I'm going to stop communicating. But I guarantee other teams do that also. Okay.
Well, this person wasn't saying I'm going to stop communicating.
Okay.
This person was like, I'm not doing any work on this project until we communicate better, until we talk more, until we work.
Just putting up a strong boundary.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what was the result at the end? Where were they at the end of 6 weeks?
Well, where they were at the end was they decided that one was no longer going to be part of the business.
Okay.
That they would be a support to their partner, but not kind of a main co-founder.
Okay.
Yeah, and what they really wanted was to feel emotionally connected again, and like they were in sync on their relationship and where the business fit in the total relationship, and they got there.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So it's possible in a 6-week process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take months to get to good places with strong facilitated support.
It's true. It doesn't have to. And
It doesn't have to.
you have to be deeply committed to doing the work yourself.
And what does that look like for people?
I mean, in my program, it looks like, doing the homework.
Okay.
No homework slackers. If you're going to homework slack, you're not.
You're not in it. Yeah.
Well, you're not just.
You're not going to get the value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And what's an example of one of the homeworks?
What's an example of one of the homeworks? That's a good question. You mean in terms of a video topic, or you mean?
Well, you mentioned video. How are you using video?
Yeah.
Being in media, I'm curious how you're using video.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I basically just talk about a topic. Like I'll talk about, so one of the things I talk about at the beginning is figuring out your conflict operating system.
Conflict operating system. Interesting. I love how you're using all the tech terms to weave it back in. It's really good. Okay. So what is your COS? What's your COS?
What's your COS, right?
Yeah.
And, so one part of our COS is, do I pull away from conflict?
Okay.
Do I
avoidance?
Right. Do I avoid conflict?
Got it.
Oh, sorry. Do I move towards conflict? Or, do I just have like this kind of middle ground, healthy balance?
How do I generally handle conflict?
Yeah, how do I generally handle conflict? And so a homework assignment might be really thinking about that, like reflecting on that and saying to yourself, and also thinking about where did that come from? How did
Why am I annoyed by that?
No. How did it come to be that I'm a conflict avoider?
Got it. Okay.
Did I grow up with a lot of conflict?
Yeah.
And
where did I learn how to deal with conflict?
Where did I learn how to deal with conflict and how?
Because it trains your blueprint on how you're going to run conflict in your programming.
That's right.
Got it. And so much of our everyday experience is programming. And
that's right.
How did we learn how to do this, communicate like this?
Exactly.
Someone had said to me recently, if you're going to start a relationship, get really good at arguing. Get really good at how are you going to handle challenges and struggle. It's hard though. I don't know how, when you're in a good place, you want to talk about those things.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a good place, you just want it to be fluid forever. And you really don't think, like I always say, no. Everyone thinks about how to get together. No one thinks about the breakup.
Yeah.
And do you ever talk about the exit of the relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever can you either had an experience or can you recommend, like, you know what, you guys should exit. You guys should divorce. Is that ever appropriate?
Yeah, that's happened.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely happened.
With your client directly?
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Definitely.
Interesting. So there is a time where it's like, we're going to break this relationship.
Yeah, and
up.
I would say that I think that has happened more with co-founders than, married couples that I've worked with. Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to, split a business. And you had mentioned earlier, we were talking about the way that we describe the parents birthing a company, and now that they're parents. So just speak to that for a sec. That when you start a company, it's like becoming parents, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of those challenges that they're feeling and starting?
You mean starting the baby?
Yeah. If we're calling the baby the company, and your two co-founders are now becoming parents.
Yes.
So what are some common challenges that are coming up for them then?
I mean, I guess really where I see the parenting analogy come out is in parenting, you believe, and it's true and important that you're 50% of the decision about what happens to your kid, you believe you deserve to have. You should.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're the CTO and you're the CMO, the CTO is the one with the ultimate expertise in the tech and should ultimately be making the decisions about, right? And so how much power that's not equal in decision making, I feel like that's where
again, it comes back to power dynamics.
Yeah, it's like you're having a baby together, but you don't actually get equal say the way you do. Or the way you hope you do. I mean, I think a lot of couples, it plays out differently too.
Yeah.
Men defer to women on a lot of things. But like, I think if you want to have co-decision making in a marriage, you feel entitled to it.
Got it.
Versus it just doesn't work that way in business.
Okay. Well, wrapping up, I have one more question. You're a solo entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And you're having solo conflict with your business. Is your program or is your services the right approach, and what would be some recommendations? Where you're challenged by just running the thing, doing the business. You don't have support. You're a single parent. You've got your baby of your company, but you're a single parent. So what would be some strategies? Is your program work for that? because it's a one-sided program?
Yeah, I mean, my program is really is interpersonal conflict.
Okay.
So what you're talking about is intrapersonal.
Yeah.
Intrapersonal. So you're talking more about burnout and managing burnout.
Which is something we talk about often with Zen Hustlers because the burnout.
Yeah.
The overwhelm and the burnout.
Yeah.
Which could be happening with some companies and teams, but one person's carrying more of that burden.
Yeah. I mean, definitely one of the things that contributes to conflict in co-founder dynamics and any work is somebody burnt out, right? For sure. So I talk about that, but what you're saying is if you're just a solopreneur and you're burnt out, I mean, a lot of the tools from...
Because we can't do active listening unless we start writing down what's fact, what's story. That might be an interesting example to do. So any strategies for the solopreneurs out there, just they don't have that co-founder. They're single parents.
Yeah. This is a really good question. The thing that comes to my mind the most is the self-worth and business tie. That's probably where the biggest bang for the buck is going to come from the solopreneur. Is really asking how much is this baby and the success of this baby, how much of my self-worth is really tied to it. And are there ways that I can decouple it from it, so that I'm not so stressed out and burnt out that this isn't working, or I'm not putting all my time into it, and I'm not, taking care of myself or investing in relationships to have a fuller life. That would be the place.
Okay. And how do you recommend people kind of go through that? Is it a journaling process? Is it, how do they figure out that assessment of where they're at?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you start to think about how, pulling back from the business, or, doing less, or if those things really make somebody very anxious and nervous, then the chances are that there's a little too much self-worth wrapped up in it. Okay. Yeah, wrapped up in the business.
Okay. Interesting. Because I think it's something that's happening. So maybe the secondary program is just founder intrapersonal conflict, because there's a lot of solopreneurs and solo founders that don't have that support system of a team member to lean on, and they're at the top of their pyramid. Then there's nobody to lean on. Yeah. So interesting.
That's true.
So what would you like people to learn about on the website when they go visit the website? We're going to put it up on the bottom.
Oh, you mean
the co-founder conflict website? What can people do and interact with on the site?
On my site?
Yeah.
I mean, they can learn about the program.
Okay.
They can learn about the program. Yeah.
Got it. And then do they schedule a meeting? What's the process for signing up?
Yeah. If somebody's interested in, potentially working with me, the first thing to do is that we meet for a 30-minute kind of consult. So they get a sense of what it's like, what I'm like, what it's like to work with me. And we sort of talk about what they're wanting to get out of it and what would the focus be. Okay,
great. Last tips for people that are dealing with this. What's some parting advice for folks?
Learn to listen well. Learn to identify your feelings and actually articulate them as feelings and differentiate them from your stories. So feelings is a very short list. Sad, mad, glad, scared. It's a very short list. Whereas we have so many other things that we say are feelings, like I feel disrespected, I feel unimportant. Those are not feelings. Those aren't feelings.
Okay, that's the interpretation.
That's the story.
Or the reaction to the feeling.
Yeah, the story I'm telling myself is I'm not very important.
Got it. Well, if you'd like to learn more, you can follow the website. We'll put it up on the bottom of the post. Thank you so much. It's been enlightening. I love hearing more about this. I think it's a really attractive concept that you support business relationships because we're all in these diverse business relationships. And now we have a support system out there.
That's right.
So thank you so much for coming in and being in person.
Thank you.
Being our first in-person interview since the pandemic. So we're really excited for you.
I'm excited too.
Anything else you'd like to mention, everybody? Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah,
thanks
you
all.
so much.
Stay tuned for more, and we'll put links to Laura's work. And thanks. We hope you find balance on the edge wherever you're living through. Take care.